Welcome back, folks. You're listening to Aging with Power on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. And just as a reminder, we are live on Facebook. So go to KHTS Radio, like that, and tune in, and we'll wave and say hi and all that other kind of stuff. Also, if you've missed any part of the show, that you can pull it back up on hometownstation.com and listen to the podcast and share it with friends and such, because the next part of the show is going to be a fun one for me and hopefully for you as well. As I mentioned earlier on the show, with me right now is Jerry Green, an old friend from back in the Universal Studios day, and he's actually chronicled some of his journey with Universal Studios, or pretty much all of his journey, and the book is called 25 Years Inside Universal Studios, From Tour Guide to Entertainment Director. Again, Jerry, welcome to Aging with Power.
Well, thank you.
And
the word old keeps coming up.
It does.
It
does. It does. You know, as far as aging with power, at least you're aging.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
That's true. You are too. Really well.
I know.
Well,
Can you
I was going to say
believe it?
well, but
But again, I've got to say, I read the book, and it probably means a lot different to me than it would for anyone else. But I mean, I found myself laughing out loud. I mean, just some of your anecdotes and some of your stories, and but anyway, before we get into that, tell us a little bit about Jerry Green, and I know we're going to talk about your journey through Universal, and you and I both probably should have a tattoo somewhere on the as you know, we were such ingrained in the Universal, or it's ingrained into our history, but
our DNA. Yeah.
Absolutely. But tell me a little bit about Jerry Green.
Well, it's actually all told in the book, so
Buy the book.
Yeah. I was born and raised in Florida, and then when I was a young teenager, my mom remarried, moved to Arizona, and then when I came to California on my honeymoon, actually, and came back a year later. When I was here the first time, visited, did all the tourist stuff, Universal, Disneyland, that stuff. Came back a year later, and Disneyland again and Universal. And I found out Universal was going to opening applications for tour guides. So a week later, I came back, flew back a week later.
And this was sort of when they were actually kind of birthing the concept as well, right?
Yeah, it was in 1968. So the tour started in '64. We were still trying to figure out what we were doing back then. It was a real trial and error kind of time in the life of Universal, although our president at the time probably wouldn't say that. He thought he had a pretty good handle on things, and he really did. But we tried a lot of things, didn't work, but anyhow, I came back and I applied for the job as tour guide, and they hired me on the spot. Obviously desperate for tour guides, so
I wasn't going to say anything.
I wanted to beat you to it. So I, didn't give the 2-week notice thing or anything back home when I was working in Phoenix. I just told them I couldn't come back and started work. But it was really a great time, because there was a small group of guides. There wasn't the big corporate level that it is now, and we knew everybody. We kind of hung out together. As I say in the book, we partied together, but partying back then meant something different than it does now.
Right.
We're just good friends, so we kind of grew up together. Most everybody that I was tour guide with, they were the sons or daughters or nieces or nephews of some famous Hollywood person, and not me. I grew up in a little small farm in Florida, North Florida, right on the Panhandle. So I was really out of my element, but it was a great time. I got to know all of them, and we kind of shared stories. We went to Bob's Big Boy. My son Matthew is an instructor, a professor at the Masters University here in our valley, and he's in charge of the film and writing and all that, directing. And so this past Saturday night, we got to go to Warner Brothers, our old competitor, and see the screening of Masters University's newest project. It was spectacular. But my point was that it was there's the kind of thing where Universal was kind of competing with Disney, or not Disney. We were competing with Disney. I talk about that in my book a lot. The war that went on between Universal and Disney. But it was that time we went to Bob's Big Boy in Toluca Lake the other night before going to the screening, and one of my earliest memories is at Bob's Big Boy, because one evening after we finished work, some of the tour guides went down to Bob's Big Boy just to hang out and have dinner. And I'm sitting, there's about 8 of us there, and I'm sitting, we're in the back, talking to this girl to my left, one of my female friends who was a guide, and suddenly behind me to my right, this guy starts yelling at me, screaming, at the top of his, it wasn't a quiet little scream that only we could, he was screaming at the top of his lungs. Everybody in the restaurant could hear him. Everybody. And our hearts, up in our mouth, and our adrenaline's pumping, and he's screaming, and suddenly he throws his napkin on the table, he gets up and walks out. So we sat there for a couple minutes, and we kind of snuck out, hoping nobody knew we were associated with the studio. I go out to the parking lot, and this guy's leaning against his car with smiles on his face. And I approached him before I knocked his teeth out. I said, "What's the deal?" He said, "I always do that when I'm eating somewhere and I don't have money to pay for my food. I always do that. It takes everybody's mind off the check, so I can leave without worrying about the check." So I was
good to know.
The other guides control the situation, and we all left. But I didn't eat out with him anymore, unless I checked his wallet first. Yeah.
Well, one thing I really enjoyed at the book, I mean, because I knew you were a pioneer, and you were like really sort of the there for the start of it. But when I started seeing some of these old names that and I always wondered, because kind of a quick history, folks. Jerry was, I started as Jerry's boss, and Jerry became my boss, and I became his boss again as he was in and out of management. It was sort of this do-si-do dance as I was in the entertainment department as well. But some of the names that you mentioned, because you were always the peacemaker, you could always talk to anybody. Whenever there was a conflict, it was like, well, what does Jerry think? But then I started looking, well, these people you grew up with at Universal, like I remember Richard Annis in the wardrobe department.
Yeah.
You would always
Taffy, we called him Taffy.
You would calm him down. I'm like, well, why do they always listen to you, Jerry? But then I realized that you were roommates. You had history with these guys as Universal Studios grew sort of into the mega hit that it is today. Yeah. I mean, and I was reading some of your expert excerpts that you said on the tour, which made it in the final cut, because I remember my days as a tour guide when we went through all the training and stuff. Some of your verbiage is still there in the training manual, and the things that we said as tour guides, and so I mean, it was really sort of a trial and error thing as you grew up with Universal Studios, right?
Definitely. We made it up as we went. When I first started as a guide, well, nowadays it's different because and it has been for the last 30 years.
Yeah, now they push a button and play a video.
Yeah, I know. How boring is that, right?
Yeah.
We were the tour for an hour and a half. The guests got on the tram, and we had them for an hour and a half. And we had, nowadays they have, and for the last 30 years, they've had an assigned sound stage they go to every day, set up for the tour. At least it was last time I went. Back in the day when I started, we didn't have an assigned stage. When we got there in the morning, we got a shooting schedule from the lower lot to know what was being shot that day, and they would tell us, okay, stage 44, there's nobody on it this morning, so you guys are going to stage 44.
Right.
So we'd go down there, and later in that afternoon, maybe Kojak was going to be there or something would be shot. So we'd be in there, and the people would see an actual working set, and maybe in the afternoon we'd have to move to a different stage. But on occasion, they would give us a sound, because everything was taken that had sets on it. Everything was taken, and we had to go in a sound stage that was completely empty, bare. And you were a guide, so you can stand there and do 30 minutes of just talking about the stuff that people are interested in.
Right.
But after 30 minutes, 35 minutes, you start reaching for material. And, I'm convinced that a lot of the Hollywood rumors got started by tour guides in those empty sound stages.
Right. Well, we called that stall material.
That's right.
And, when trams would break down and stuff. But what I thought really cool, because I came about a decade after you pioneers got the thing started, but to read in the book with some, like Edith Head, the famous wardrobe person. I mean, the people you actually talked to and interacted with was basically kind of lore by the time I came in, and we would reflect back on the story, and well, rumor has it that blah blah blah, and a lot of times, like you said, sometimes it was true, sometimes it was made up as stall material because the career guys we were reaching. Yeah. But we're going to take our next break.
We always try to tell the truth, but if that didn't work, then we'd go to the fiction side.
That's
of it.
right.
So,
Well, we're going to continue this after the break, folks. We're talking to Jerry Green, author of 25 Years Inside Universal Studios, and you're listening to Aging with Power on your hometown station AM 1220 KHTS. Welcome back, folks. This is Aging with Power on your hometown station AM 1220 KHTS. I'm your host, Myles McNamara, and with me in studio, Mr. Jerry Green. And we're talking about Jerry's book, 25 Years Inside Universal Studios, from tour guide to entertainment director. and as we'll probably talk about now, we've kind of referred to it a little bit, but I also had a 15-year history with Universal Studios, and I had the oh God, he'll never let me live this down, privilege of working with Jerry, because Jerry, and I want to get into it a little bit, Jerry, because you talk about in your book where you've really hosted over 32,000 live shows, and
yes,
and from being a tour guide to entertainment manager or entertainment director. So let's talk. It really has been. I remember when I came into the entertainment department, I was brought in as a little snot-nosed kid darn near, and I was in charge of all the shows. We had the Animal Show, we had Conan at the time, we had the Animal Actor stage, and then there was this stage at the corner of the park called the Screen Test Comedy Theater, and I'm like, well, what about that show? They're like, leave that show alone. I'm like, what? He goes, they run themselves, but that's part of us. That's what. Leave it alone. So then I met the Fab Four: Jerry Green, Bob Formica, Don Martin, and Larry Curran. Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about that, the Screen Test Comedy Theater, and your job is, once you left the world of tour guiding and became really, and I'm going to say, the golden boy of upper management at Universal Studios. It seemed like whenever they had a big event, a big show opening, something that really was going to be in the spotlight, they called Jerry Green. Well,
when you're on the receiving end of it, you don't think of yourself as a golden boy. You're just going about doing what you normally do, and that's what I did. I just loved hosting. And when I left tour guiding, I actually started introducing the other shows, like the Stunt Show and the Animal Show and the Marionette Show. We had a Marionette Show and a Pantomime Show. Boy, was that exciting! That didn't last that long. And you never had to wait to get in that show. There was never a long line. So, but the guy was very nice. I still remember his name, Antonin Hodek, and the Pantomime Show. Anyhow, I would announce those shows, and I got to know all the guys. And but then they gave me my own show, which was the Screen Test Comedy Theater, and we ran that for. It actually started before I got there. It started in 1970 in a stage called Stage 70, which was where Conan was. And then after a year or so, then I came in I think 71 or 72, and then a year later they moved us to the Screen Test Comedy Theater, the theater you were talking about. It was a show where we took about 30 people from the audience, we put them in costumes on set, very elaborate sets, and we filmed a movie starring them. And we usually based our movie on a TV show, or like Adam 12 or Emergency, and then or a movie, Airport 77. We did that one, and then we did one called The Great Chase, which was like a conglomeration of a whole bunch of different shows. But they left us to ourselves. I was the show captain, and I did the scheduling. All of the guys really knew what they were doing. They didn't need me to schedule them. We all had the same days off for 15, 20 years. Another fellow that was part of the group was Joe Turpel. Our group was actually 5 rather than 4. And we worked together, and Joe just passed away about a month ago.
Fab 4 works better.
It does, yeah. It's got that
Fab 5. Okay, we'll go that way.
Nice sound to it. Fabulous 5. Anyhow, Joe passed away about a month ago, so it's kind of sad. But we worked together. Everybody knew what they were doing, so nobody had to tell anybody what to do. And but anyhow, we did screen test shows for 15, 20 years. And as I said, did about 32,000 of them.
And it really was an anchor, because I remember my first trip. I mean, as you say in your book, when people come to Universal Studios, the attraction is possibly seeing a movie star, probably see filming. Yeah. And I remember when who hasn't gone to the Screen Test Comedy Theater? If you think back as a child or an adult, you wanted. I was picked out of the audience because I had moved down to Los Angeles. I wanted to be an actor, and you're walking through thinking you're going to meet Spielberg or someone who's going to make you a star. Yeah. But I remember going to the Screen Test Comedy Theater, and I don't think I've ever told you this, Jerry. Actually, you were the host, and I was picked out of the audience. I was trained by the infamous Bob Formica or whatever, and it was so surreal because you obviously, as you say in your book as well, you intercut that with actual footage from the film, and it's really a cool thing for the guests. Yeah. I mean, it really was. And then to circle back and then in real life be working with you guys in the entertainment department and flashing back to the days of when I first walked onto that studio in the tour, picked from the audience to be in your show, and I'm like, oh my God, that's Jerry Green.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that, because we had people who would come back to the show every week. They had an annual pass, and they'd come back. We had one fellow in particular. He would come back every week, and he honestly believed that this was going to make him a star. We kind of felt sorry for him. I picked him almost every time he came. The other guys didn't want me to. Don't pick him, because he was there all the time. So, and when you pick, we only had like 30 roles. So when you pick one person over and over again out of an audience of 2,000 or 2,500, then you're eliminating one part somebody else could have. But I just felt sorry for the guy, so I picked him. But the stories that you mentioned, Bob Formica, he is in the book. I mentioned a lot of things he did. Bob was a story unto himself.
He really was.
He passed away about 4 years ago too. He was a great guy, but just full of life, and he was a drill sergeant at heart. So I gave him a chance at hosting one time. He says, "Can I host the show?" And I said, "Well, Bob, because he was our cameraman, really. Bob was a cameraman. Don was the technical director. Larry was a host. He and I hosted. We took turns, and then Joe would run camera or host when we weren't there. But Bob said, "Let me try." So we worked for a while, and then I figured one day, it was a summer day, and it was kind of slow in the afternoon. I said, "Go ahead and try it." So he picks up the microphone, and you got to imagine in your mind a drill sergeant with the hat and the uniform and all that stuff, and the crop under his arm, walks, except it was a microphone. He walks to the edge of the stage and he says, "Okay, listen up, you people." That's how Bob began the show.
Hosting is not for everybody.
That was as good as it got. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to take our next break, and when we come back, we're going to wrap it up with Jerry. Because I got to say, it was one of the best times of my life. And there's a Facebook group called Universal Old Friends, which is cool. And some of the people that you flash back to and quick shout out. I just connected with a guy on there, Ron Kyle. If you're listening, Ron, I don't know if you're up, but he was like my absolute favorite tram driver because you get on the tram as a tour guide. Yeah. You've got your tram driver, and you were sort of a team for the next 2 hours.
That's right.
And so Ron was always. So I hope you're doing well, Ron. But we're going to take our next break. We'll be back up, wrap up on talking about the book and how you can order it, and maybe take a quick shout out to Jerry's first book. So don't go away. You're listening to Aging with Power on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Welcome back, folks. This is Aging with Power on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. And we are talking with author Jerry Green. That's an interesting ring to it, doesn't it, Jerry? Yeah. Author Jerry Green, a longtime friend from my Universal Studios days, and he's written a book, 25 Years Inside Universal Studios, his journey from tour guide to entertainment director. And gosh, Jerry, the time has flown here. Not only in life, but on the show. There's so many stories we could talk about. But you do mention in the book, a lot of different things, a lot of different people who had a lot of different influences in our life. I just want to get a quick shout out to Ron Bensian. I don't know if he's listening, but anyway, Ron was our vice president of operations, later went on to president.
Yes, he did.
He's now president of House of Blues Entertainment and opening House of Blues around. Ron had an interesting management style.
He had an interesting management style.
But what?
I talk about Ron a lot in the book.
You do.
Because I admired him.
Yeah.
I admired him a lot.
One of the smartest guys.
We didn't always get along. But,
no, he did.
We didn't always agree. We always got along.
Right.
We didn't always agree because we had different management styles. But Ron was, if you look up the word manager in the dictionary, his picture should be there. He's great. Yeah.
And he was hard on you, but if you did your job, he let you go. I know you talked about in your book too about blanking on a couple names. I think I wrote it down. Ray Berwick and from Star Trek, George Takei during the Celebrity of the Day. Yeah. And I got to tell you that I had nightmares because people don't know, and it's not about me. This is about you. This show, but I was also a show host, a tour guide, and I had the Miami Vice Action Spectacular show up there. I used to have nightmares about coming out on stage and saying, and have nothing. Yeah. Nothing.
Some people, their coat's missing or their pants are missing. Mine was microphone. It really was. I was ready to go on, and you got a 2,000, or if I did shows in the amphitheater where it was 5,000 people. You're about to go on stage, and the microphone, and nobody's there to get it for you, and you wake up in a sweat.
Yeah.
I had those a lot of times.
See, my nightmare wasn't not having the microphone. Mine was having no words. Literally come out, open the show, and totally having nothing to say, which people accuse me of that all the time anyway, but
for different reasons.
But for different reasons.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, Ron, he was a good guy. I know he complimented you a couple times, when you'd pull off a show, and he kind of did the same thing for me at one time because I opened the Miami Vice show. Same thing. We're not rated open. We're press is here. Don Johnson and Tubbs are here. I can't remember the actor's name who played Tubbs, but anyway,
Sonny Tubbs. I don't know.
But he came up and nice job or whatever. I said, careful, someone's going to catch you being nice.
Well, when he did it to me, he made sure there was only the two of us.
Yeah.
I went through the same thing when we opened the Star Trek show. We had packed house and press. There probably were, I'm guessing, 3,000 people crammed into a 2,000-seat theater.
Right.
And we had the full cast of Star Trek except Nimoy. He wasn't there. But it was a great time, and we weren't really ready, but we,
Well, folks, it's a great read. Again, 25 years inside Universal Studios. So, Jerry, how does someone get a hold of this copy? I just bought
Amazon.
this. Amazon.com?
Amazon.com. It's available in paperback or Kindle. So you can get it there.
And it's easy, folks. I just ordered my copy. I mean, just go to Amazon.com, type in 25 years inside Universal Studios in the search bar. It'll come up. And real quick, Jerry, this is your second book. Your first book, Stealing Dawn. I just ordered a copy of that. I haven't read it yet, but quick synopsis of Stealing Dawn?
It actually takes place around a presidential election, but it has nothing to do with that. It just and I wrote this story long before this past election, so it really wasn't based on that, but just happens to fit the story. This little girl's kidnapped. She's the niece of a guy who's running for president, and unbeknownst to the senator, his wife hires this mercenary to go find her. The mercenary's like a really bad guy. He's not friendly to anybody. And he goes to find this little girl, and he finds her right away. He finds her like in the first few days. Most of the story takes place with him getting her back home and what they go through and how he changes. And it's I just finished a sequel to it, ready to send that to the publisher in a week or so.
Well, very cool.
Thanks.
Well, Jerry, thanks for coming out. I mean, we'll probably have you back to not only talk about Stealing Dawn in the sequel, but more about Universal, because this is, you forget sometimes the special people you meet along your journey, and again, just reading your book, I caught myself laughing out loud, like I said, and working with you guys, the iconic Screen Test Comedy Theater crew, who you guys really did run yourself over there, but when I think back to the folks that we've worked with, the Ron Bensians and the Steve Lews and the folks that really was the growth and maturation of the iconic Universal Studios Hollywood tour, which I know you also helped them open the one in Florida as well. But we are out of time, so we are going to run. We'll have Jerry back. We'll talk more about this because there's a lot of good war stories to share.
We'll talk about your acting career next time.
Yeah,
in a movie we were making.
That's right. He did a movie called Parrots Pershing. Didn't even give credit to his lead actor. Thanks, Jerry. But that does bring us to the end of the show, folks. If you ever have a special topic that you want me to talk about, please feel free to drop me an email at mileswithay@comfortkeepers.com. I'll make it happen. Again, that's mileswithay@comfortkeepers.com. We are sponsored by Comfort Keepers In-Home Care. I'm Myles McNamara of Comfort Keepers In-Home Care. And folks, remember, aging is not a disease, it's a journey. So do it with power.